maybe 7 or 8 years, not many ambassadors have been visiting Canada. There was not very much emphasis on diplomats coming back to Canada, telling the story of what embassies are doing overseas. And this is a bit of a change in our new government right now. There's more of an emphasis on interacting with Canadians, interacting with media, with community groups. So I've been very lucky that I had this opportunity to come to Canada. I'm on a 2-week trip across the country. I was in Toronto briefly, and then I went to Ottawa, Montreal, Waterloo, back to Toronto, and then I'm going to Vancouver tomorrow. And I've been talking to university groups, I've been talking to think tanks, to development NGOs, to local governments, other levels of government. For example, in the universities, they're mostly interested in what's the story about what's happened quickly to be in 2010 and today remain hold. But a very evocative moment to see a long absence. Back to present day. That is the building where our embassy is. Unfortunately, it's not a very attractive building, but as I say, we have the best view because we don't have to look at our building. So we're on the 9th floor, and remember that was in August 2014. Minister Baird and the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tan Cha. And we had, so there was a lot of interest in the opening of the Canadian Embassy to be opened in 2014. And I know that also Minister Fast came, Prime Minister, unfortunately. Maybe first, who knows? We can only hope. So here's some pictures of the embassy. Embassy is very modern, very antique looking, which is quite different from. It's very hot. The electricity's not very good. You know, the power over down toward the lake, the river. I will say the most important room in any embassy in Burma is the lunchroom. That's where all of the. So, what have we been doing? Well, I mentioned Manulife. This triple reform of political, economic, social peace process. The economic part has moved very fast in one sense. You've had a lot of foreign companies come in selling consumer goods like Nestle and Kentucky Fried Chicken and so on. Some sectors, though, have not opened up as much as we'd hoped. For example, insurance. So Manulife is not making any money yet, right? But one company that is making money is Bombardier. They've sold airplanes to FMI, and they have the potential, they think, to do a lot of business there. Government of Ontario attended the computer show, Comcast in Burma last year, and it's not public yet, but they made a couple of sales. So there are some small but significant sales in that area. That's the first time there's been a Canadian government participation in a trade show in Burma. So that was sort of historic in a way too. So another development cooperation program. And I was in Waterloo. It was over $1 million for flood relief. You know, the reason we were able to go, there's more confidence because we can go and do due diligence, see, I had the chance to visit some of these flood-affected communities, hear people's stories, hear about what kinds of things they needed. It's a very interesting project. I mentioned some of the Canadians very actively now in multilateral programming. This is actually in Northern State, and what it is it's a project where children who come to school rice as a way, an incentive to keep them in school. And the other thing that it does is it's a bit of a community building measure. Everybody is eligible, so it's a way for children who are Buddhist or Muslim to have a chance to sit down and build these community ties that have been. So, there was an article in the Globe and Mail last year which talked about Burma as a laboratory for democracy. And I have terminology because You know, the image of Burma over the past quarter century has always been negative. But now I think there's an understanding that there's some very, very fast progress going on in Burma in terms of civil rights and democracy. And we've been very happy that we've been able to participate and to support some of them. To give you an example, the Forum of Federations, we've funded training about federalism to civil servants, political parties, military, members of parliament. It's a very, very crucial issue, something that was completely taboo 5 years ago, but now there's an understanding that some kind of federal system is necessary if there's going to be a long-term solution to Burma's ethnic and regional problems. We've supported PEN Myanmar a lot. So I believe Matida was here.
Yeah, a couple of times.
So projects regarding freedom of expression. We've talked about human rights defenders. We supported the Myanmar, the Yangon Human Rights Film Festival, Myanmar Human Rights, Human Dignity. Brought Canadian directors and film technicians to Yangon to run classes for documentary filmmakers to make films about human rights issues and social issues. And I think this is really exciting because there's so many amazing stories to be told in Burma, and we're helping people tell their stories. Supported LGBT issues. We've worked on some interfaith issues and parliamentary exchanges, and then I'll talk a little bit about election support. So here's, for example, the Human Rights Film Festival.
It was here.
So if you have contacts in Yangon or other places, I'm always very interested to go and talk to people. This is a mosque. I wanted to mention quickly some of the things we did during the election. So we don't want to be very present in public because it's not our election. It's the election of the Myanmar people, the Burmese people. But one thing we did was the Open Myanmar Initiative, which is an organization that was founded by Koko G and some other members of the 88th generation students to do voter education training. You know, how do you participate? How do you even listen in an election actively so that you're not passive consumers of propaganda or political discourse? Training in 14 small but significant Canadian funding. This was a really fun event. I don't know if you can see on the screen, but that's the Canadian election. So if you remember, the Canadian election was about 3 weeks before the Burmese election. Yes. So when the elections were running, we were able to talk to the Burmese, the election commission, about what was happening in Canada. You want to know about advanced polling? Well, take a look at how they're doing it. And the most fun event was on Canadian election night, which is breakfast time in Yangon. We invited all of the journalists who cover the election to come and watch the Canadian election night coverage, and also members of the Union Election Commission. So it was fun for them to watch the Canadian coverage, which is very fast, right? Within 2 hours. So, so they were just amazed, like, oh, because they were planning 2 weeks. The part they liked was when they showed the different political campaigns. So they go to the NDP and they're all depressed, and the Conservatives are all depressed, and then the Liberals are cheering and playing music, and they were just amazed by that. And then we did a lot of election monitoring. That's our entire embassy staff, plus 2 staff from overseas. So this is our trade officer, local staff, local trade officer, Canadian development officer, other development officer, and these are our Canadian university interns. So everybody from the embassy got accreditation to be an observer, and we fanned out across the southern half of the country, and we did election observation in 5 different states and regions, and visited almost 45 different polling stations. All kinds of polling stations. We looked for trouble. We looked for ethnic minority areas. We went to Naval's yard, a military barracks, and we also did. We watched the polling, and I mean, posting is the most exciting one of my career, but that was the best day, I think, of my 2.5 years so far. It was such a, the night before there was a little bit of nervousness you know, it's kind of like the night before your wedding or something like that. you right.
Everybody.
But there's a so, and then in the morning, you know, this was I went to Bogale the day before in the Delta, and I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning at the polling station. Incredibly well organized. It was all of these maybe 40 to 60-year-old women, school teachers.
Very famous event.
Really?
We saw that.
It was so well organized, and the lineups began to form before dawn, and by ready to vote. I think people very well dressed, you know, sort of again like a wedding or a, you know, like they're going to some sort of formal event. Everybody wanted to take. When they see foreigners, they always want to take photographs of, you know, selfies, have us take photographs of them. It was really quite an amazing day, and the anxiety and fear that people felt the night before and maybe at dawn, it started to evaporate as the day went on, and by, you know, maybe by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, you know, accomplishment that everybody is really quite a remarkable feeling. I get kind of nervous when I talk about it, right? Overlay, maybe 9 o'clock in the morning. We were able to, you know, we could question the representatives of the parties. As I said, we were looking for trouble, but didn't really find any. I came back to Yangon to go to the polling station nearest to the embassy in Paveda Township, and in our polling station, it was about 90% NLD. And when I saw that, I thought, ooh, this could be a, that was quite obvious that there was going to be some landslide. So just a couple of other quick things and I'll stop is, we've also been, we've started to move into some other kinds of cooperation, which is sort of quasi-security. We've helped the immigration department to do things like how to detect fake documents. You know, this isn't a way to keep people out. It's a way to prevent human smuggling. And also, what we want to do is we want the immigration officers in Myanmar to, you know, see their job as facilitating travel for commercial purposes. So we've done a lot of training with border and also with security of the port to prevent smuggling of illegal goods, transshipment of people, contraband. So a different area. And then the one you've all been waiting for, the visa. The visa application center. So you may know that there are 3 countries opened it together: Canada, Australia, and UK. And it's located in a very convenient location downtown Yangon. The service is still not fast. It still takes maybe 2 weeks, but at least you don't have to go to Bangkok, have your biometrics taken, come back to Yangon, go to Bangkok again, pick up your visa. It can all be done there. And the good news is the number of visas that have been processed in the half year. This is my slide about now we can facilitate more exchanges of people. I remember when Sayadaw Sitigu came here, it was very, very complicated getting everyone their visas. More commercial visits, more students, more tourists, more NGOs, everything. That's it. So the last thing I wanted to leave you with was I hope you all follow our Facebook page. You may or may not know we have a very active Facebook page that's available in English, French, and Burmese, and it's now it's actually the second most popular in Burma after the Americans. And so even though we have a very small embassy and we're very new, I think we've managed to get our message out about what we're doing to the people in Burma through social media. And I hope that's a way to build more understanding of people in Burma, that Canada is not this strange, faraway, cold place that's not present. We're very present in Burma. We're trying to do as much as we can with the people and resources we have, and we want to be thought of as a very helpful, respectful, and cooperative partner with people there. So, that's it. Thank you very much.
Officer told me. And when the mother or my father was dying, I had to go back to take care of my father or my mother. That means you have no fear. Then you give up your permanent residence.
This is a Canadian charity based out of Vancouver, and if you want more, if anyone wants more details about it, just write me. Maybe instead of putting my email up there, you can feel free to write me directly. I may not respond right away, but if you want more information about that, I'm happy to do so. If you are aware of any human rights organizations who need very small grants, $2,000 or $5,000, something like that, we do have a grants program at the embassy. So feel free again to put them in touch with me. It's quite competitive, but we do support some groups. What we've done over the 2.5 years I've been there is give these very small grants, maybe $2,000 or $5,000, and if an organization does very well with it, for example, Human Rights Film Institute, then kind of help them look for a larger amount of money from a different source, the following year. I just want to say about saying we're promoting federalism. I'd like to think we're responding to requests, tell people what to do. What the training usually about is talking about different models of federalism, what federalism can be. There's not just one kind of federalism, and you pick which kind you think is going to work for you. So that's how we've been approaching that. Parliamentary exchanges I think are very valuable. Some of the training with federalism, by the way, I went to a training that was solely for NLD party members. 70 of them in the training I went to last year, and it turned out 6 of them are now members of parliament, so have had an impact. Youth, it's possible, but we've got a limited amount of money and time, so it's something we can think about, but sure, a lot of competing priorities.
Thank you for meeting with us, and Seattle, thanks for hosting this event.
We invited foreign ambassadors and diplomats for a lot of briefings, and we were also able to meet with a lot of the ethnic armed groups from time to time. So I think we were quite well informed about the process, but Canada didn't really play an active role in the process because, again, this was very much their task. The EU and Japan, I will say, put a lot of money into supporting those negotiations are very expensive, bringing people from Chiang Mai and other places and financing negotiations. So I'm afraid we weren't an active player in that, but we were late to the game. One thing that's going on right now is there is a joint peace fund being founded, and the idea is that it'll be a fund from many donors. Donors aren't competing with each other to find the most prestigious parts of the peace process. It'll be a multi-donor fund, and then the fund will have some sort of management that will decide how to spend that money. That's something that we're considering, but I don't know how it'll turn out. On the trade side, as I said, we have one trade officer, and we've done a few things like this IT show. We've helped a lot of Canadian companies like Bell Helicopter, which is based in the US, but the production's in Canada, Bombardier, Manulife. We work with a lot of Canadian companies that have but as I said, just in general, it's been a little bit slower for all countries. One other thing we did do was we ran this ASEAN Roadshow, which brought a delegation from different ASEAN countries to Canada to see coast to coast, the technological strengths of Canada in all kinds of areas, to agricultural processing, tourism, education, and so on. So, again, we have to be kind of realistic about our capacity to do things. So we're fairly targeted about the sectors that we've been looking at, and we've had some causes that I'm fairly satisfied with given the size of our embassy. If we had more staff, then we could do more. So, there is a project that's under that's going to be approved, I think, by the development stream soon to deal with those types of issues to support reintegration in eastern part of the Thai border area. And for example, I met today with another organization called Right to Play in Toronto. It deals a lot with education issues in populations in conflict. They have programming in Thailand in camps, and they were talking about maybe trying to launch some kind of significant program displaced, previously displaced, moving back to Burma. So we are active in that area.
Thank you.
And Yangon University, and it's dealing with water management, environment, with environment department. But they're focusing on water management, and what they want to do is contribute to a relaunch or a launching of environmental policy study in Yangon University. And you'll know that any kind of policy study was completely taboo for the last generation. So it's very, very difficult starting from scratch, And the other problem, you probably know that university administrators are very risk averse. Their job for the last 25 years has really been to make sure nothing happens. So
They are not educated.
so it's a real change of. It's going to be it's a very, very big challenge to get these administrators to think in a completely different way, to be even though the university is to develop course content, curriculum, reach out to foreign universities to start thinking about earning money, but like American universities do, launching professional programs, other kinds of programs. The change has been very, very slow on the Burmese side. So we're looking at, as I said, a couple of areas. This water. Another one is Perimeter Institute is very interested in talking about physics. Some Yangon University and other universities. But again, it's because bringing the Burmese university system up to Western level is going to be a long project. That's a successors project.
Thank you.
We've had a few Canadian companies. I'm thinking more of mining rather than oil and gas, because oil and gas, they've made a lot of progress, I think, with the tenders for the offshore and the onshore oil. But there's still the biggest problem with investment. The reason why companies are not moving in as fast is because of political instability. Well, I don't think that wasn't the biggest worry, and that worry is probably declining now. The other one was sanctions, Australian companies, but still there was limited, not the rush we were expecting. I think you'll see the Americans taking their sanctions off sometime in soonish, and that'll have a positive effect. But really, the big thing is all of this legislation and the foreign investment laws, and that's not something that comes immediately when you become a democracy, right? You can't just. It's not like taking censorship. That's a dramatic thing, but it's easy to stop censoring, right? That's a lot of work, writing all those laws.
So in your session, so it really isn't that clear in
Not yet,
response.
no. And think of all the legislation that this new legislature is going to be faced with. It's not going to happen immediately. Sorry. So I'll agree with half of what you said and disagree with half. Certainly, if we had more staff and more money, we could do more. but I think we've done very well in the sense of picking very narrow, and we've been able to make a difference in some very small, well-defined areas. So I'm pretty satisfied with what we've done with our staff. Now, let's go back a little bit. I arrived in June, around Canada Day 2013, and we didn't move into our embassy until August 2014. So that was a little bit over a year of literally building the embassy. And if you've done any business in Burma, you'll know that like getting contractors and materials and trying to meet deadlines was very, very hard. So, you know, the first year, that kind of prehistory year, was very much dominated with physically getting the building up, hiring staff, training people. So we were really about a year and a half internet access and desks, and you know, we were inside the British Embassy, which were formerly the change rooms for the guards. and I don't want to make it sound like the British were not giving us space, because they were very overcrowded too, and they were just waiting for us to leave, you know, so that they could take over that space. But every embassy in Burma was crowded, adding staff and so on. So to get back to your issues, that in that year and a half, we've gone from a couple of staff in temporary quarters to 10 staff, you know, plus driver and guards and so on. We are talking about possible expansion. Probably the area we would expand would be the development side, you know, labor intensive. There's space in the building for us to, you know, maybe double in size, but that's a decision that's not really mine to make. You know, that's made by the higher levels of, you know, the political levels. And the interesting thing, though, is that if you look at the staffing of the Department of Foreign Affairs, International Trade, Foreign Affairs, International Trade Development, staffing hasn't really increased at all in the last flat. And the fact that we've opened up embassy in Burma, so-called satellite office in Laos, Cambodia, and we've just named ambassador to ASEAN, it does indicate that although the numbers are quite small, and we've added staff in Southeast Asia, there has been a net gain, whereas areas like Europe and Africa have lost. Europe and the United States has lost staff in general. So I think given the fact that the pie is not getting bigger, we've gotten a slightly bigger slice of it over the past couple of years. Would I like to see? I would like to see the size of the embassy double. You know, I would like to have a political officer, so I'm not writing the reports. I think it would be great to have an extra, you know, an extra consular officer, because we're getting a lot of demands from Canadians. You know, tourists losing their passports or getting injured and needing documentation and so on. So we do push for more staff, but unfortunately it's not my decision to make.
It seems a long way to go.
Yeah, I think piece by piece. It's not, tomorrow they're not going to say, okay, double the size of the embassy. It'll be, you know, a person next year and 2 people the year after that kind of thing. So that's...
You soon, and anyway, before anybody, can I ask you one last question?
The MCOs has the...
Yeah. Last time when you and I met in Toronto, I mentioned about the ethnic area and the natural resources in ethnic areas. And then when, after the election, and at the time, we're hoping that democratic forces will win, and then eventual foreign investments going to Burma, and then most of them are natural resources-based investment will be in ethnic areas. Number one, yes, the man Joshua mentioned about the peace process. Yeah, that's important. Peace has to be there. And another important thing is that you and I spoke about that the vocational training, the local people, and instead of importing cities or different countries, and then if we get the vocational training for local people, in that role that World Canada will play with this new government in Ottawa and new government in Naypyidaw.
I think so. I think vocational training would be a much quicker return on investment actually than working with universities. I mean, I'm very interested in academic exchanges and helping build universities, but that's something that I kind of a more efficient and quicker wins. In terms of, so your other question was about sort of the.
Will Canada be playing that training, vocational training for the local people?
That's certainly something that we've looked at with with our development section.
Yeah.
What I think we would need is we would need a Canadian partner that's very energetic and is willing to, you know, do the research. Like, for example, Sick Kids Hospital sent a delegation of 4 people to Burma to meet with, you know, health professionals, government, NGOs, to get the information that they need to put together a reasonable proposal. And then putting together these proposals for funding is also very labor
Similar to the one like Forum for Federations.
like former federations, or like MEDA. So MEDA, you know, had to travel with their own funding to Shan State, Grand State, and to get the on-the-ground data to make the funding agencies confident that they know what they're doing.
So, like when Forum for Federation started, I worked with Rupak and Felix to start writing the proposal, finding the partners in Burma. So I helped them. So will there be the similar process that vocational training that what you suggest as
So,
a Canadian partner?
Possibly. Now, this gets sort of into the details of different sources of funding, but the Forum of Federations grew on a program called the Global Peace and Security Fund, and actually they've kind of moved on to a bigger pot of money with multi-year development funding. So they're going to be able to expand their programming, and instead of looking at 1 year at a time, they'll be looking at 3 years. So depending on what the type of activity you're interested in, you draw on a different pot of funding. Say there's a big problem in Canada that we don't have a lot of earmarked funds for education. And part of that is because education is a provincial, so it's fragmented. It's, you know, in the US where they have different types of fellowships for students, or in countries in Europe, targeted academic exchange programs. That's something that we're lacking. But in the Prime Minister's, you know, the Prime Minister wrote a letter to all of the Canadian ambassadors about a month after he was inaugurated, and outlined a number of priorities. And one of them was to start rethinking about cultural and educational exchanges as an important part of diplomacy, something which was kind of out of favor during the last